Okay, hi sixth grade. So this is the practice lesson 11, and these are the actual. This was the lesson on fractions, decimals, and percent equivalencies. And the first video was on the examples where I just went through and we learned how to change from decimals to. We talked about how numbers can be written with decimals. They can also be written in a fraction form, and they can also be written as a percent. And it's just important to be able to go back and forth and be able to use all these three forms. And so here are just the questions that you had in that packet. You can kind of check through. And again, with the video, you can go back and forth and stop. And you can always, so you have control over that. So that's nice. So let's go through here. This one just says, which fraction is equivalent to 25 hundredths? So really this decimal 0.25, we could think of it is, we could turn it into a fraction form. We could read it just 25 hundredths, kind of gives you the clue. You say, oh, 25 hundredths, like this. Well, so now it just becomes a question of which one of these fractions would either scale up to this, or could we simplify this? So let's simplify it. Let's simplify it. So we might start saying, well, what could we divide each one of these by? I think this is the easiest thing to do. In 25, you don't have a whole lot of options. You have 1, and always pick easy things. Look at 2, 3, 4, and 5. Maybe 10 after that. You know, pick some easy things. So 2 won't go in 25, 3, 4, but right away 5 stands out. So let's do 5. We divide that by 5. So 25 divided by 5 equals 5. And 100 divided by 5, you might have to do a little thinking there, but you could think of 10 divided, just 10 divided by 5 is 2, so one more 0 could be 20. Then we might want to ask ourselves, well, can we simplify that even further? Let's look over on the side here. Usually they're going to have, most of the time it should be in simplest form. You kind of look, they've kind of tried to trick you here with a couple of these, you know, where they have some 5s, but we could simplify this. And so that's your big idea, you know, always simplify if you can. And that just really makes your work a lot easier with a lot of things, including ratios. So 5, and let's go ahead and go 5 again. We'll divide by 5, and we've got 1/4. Nice work, nice work. You can go back again. We're just changing from a decimal to a fraction and simplify. Okay, let's look at this one over here. This time it says Hector sliced a carrot, so it was exactly 1 1/5 inches long, which also shows the length of the carrot. So now these are all in decimals. So we have to change 1 1/5 to a decimal. So we know if we put this on a place value chart, we have to have one whole, right? We know we're going to have one whole on our place value chart and something else. So if I were to have a place value chart drawn, which I don't have a lot of room, let me pause it and I'll put one on a sheet for you. Hold on. So I'm going to switch over to another page here to show you that I just created. So I know I'm going to have one whole, okay, because it's one whole and something. So watch what happens. Let's come over here to a place value chart. That means I've got to have something over here. I'm going to have one whole here. I'm not sure about what's going to go over here, you know, like what my decimal is, but I know I'm going to have one whole. Well, let's go back to the problem. Look at this. You can really quickly look. This one doesn't even have, well, look at this. This one doesn't have a whole, so that can't be it, right? If we go back and look again, I'll flip back there. Remember, we have to have one whole here. There should be a 1 because it's 1. Remember, our number is 1 1/5, which means we're going to have one whole, and this is our whole, and then we're going to have some parts, and this would be the parts. So the parts are over here, and the whole is this right here. Okay, so real quickly, we can get rid of that. We can also get rid of that. So now we're just left to these two. Pretty cool, pretty cool. So what we have to do is we have to convert 1/5 into a decimal. And there's a lot of ways to do that. If you have a calculator, you can do one. Let me give myself some more room, but they don't give you much room here, do they, for these? Okay, let me erase this. I can just go ahead and I can divide 1 divided by 5. If you have a calculator, you can do that really easily. Now, if I have one whole dollar, this is like saying $1 shared with 5 people. I'm going to have to break that dollar up into 10 tenths. So now I'm going to have to just break it up into tenths. So now I have 10 of those, basically like 10 dimes, and with 5 people, each person would get 2 of those dimes. And I subtract. So my answer is decimal 2. You could do it with a calculator. You could also scale up. You could also scale up and say, let's do it real fast here. You could say 1/5. Let's go ahead and turn that into a decimal, and I'll just use tenths, because remember, on my place value chart, I have tenths. Look, let's look at that real fast. So I've got, this is my tenths place. So I could just scale this fraction up and make it in terms of tenths, which would be times 2, and that would give me 2 tenths, which is what this is, 2 tenths or 2 tenths. So I have 1 and 2 tenths. So a couple ways to do that. All right, let's go to the next one here. What percent of the grid is shaded below? So let me get a different color. What percent of the grid? So you have to remember, this grid is, there are 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is 10 going this way, 10 rows, and then there's 10 in each row. And so there are 100. There's 100 there. So that means this is how I get my percent, right? Percent means out of 100. So out of 100 squares here, how many are shaded? And it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. These 9 are shaded. So I have 9 out of 100. That would be 9%. And look, you can see how they're trying to trick you here. Automatically, you would know I don't have 99% of that. And this one. Okay, so these are the only 2 reasonable choices. So always remember, just get rid of answers that you know are absolutely not correct. I guess I'll just go across here. I guess I'm not going sequentially, but I'll just go across to number 6. Let's take a look at that one. It is exactly 25 3/10 miles from Mr. Miller's home to where he works. Which is equivalent to that number of miles? Okay, so we have 25 and 3/10 is equivalent to which one of these? Which one of these? Well, we already said it. As soon as we see this, if you know your place value chart, that's in the tenths place. So it can't be this one, can't be that one. Okay, it's clearly got tenths right here. 25, I'm sorry, and 3/10. If I were to put that on the place value chart, that wasn't too bad. This one looks really good down here too. Which percent is equivalent to 27 out of 100? Well, 27 out of 100 is 27%, because that's what the percent sign means. That little sign means out of 100. So that was good. Okay, let's change colors. And which of the following is equivalent to 70%? Okay, so first of all, 70% means 70 out of 100. Okay, and of course, one of the things that you want to do, which of the following is equivalent to 70%? One of the things that you want to do is you, usually we would go through and we would simplify this, but just looking down here, we've got 70 out of 100. Okay, so let's simplify it. Let's simplify it. Here we go. We can for sure divide by 10. So remember that, we can always simplify. That's the second time we've seen this strategy here. Always simplify. So 70 divided by 10 equals 7. 100 divided by 10 is 7/10. Well, think of our place value chart. Where's 7/10 going to be? We can flip back over and take a look at it. And tenths, again, I'll get rid of some of the stuff that we had before. Okay, there's our tenths place. So we know 7/10 has to be right there in the 10th spot. Let's go back and look. 7/10, this is the only one. 7/10. This one looked kind of promising, didn't it, at first, because it had the 100 on the bottom, but 7/100 is not even close to 70/100. And this isn't even close at all. It just looks like it is. They put 1/7 there. This would be the one also that would be kind of tricky. Okay, but the answer is 7/10 because that's what goes on that place value chart. Always simplify, and don't forget to think about place value. Those are the big ideas that are going to save the day every time. All right, let's go down to this one. This one looks like it's careful reading. Careful reading on this one. Okay, so we're going to say which of the following is not equivalent. Okay, got to look for the not. Okay, so here is 5/10. So if I'm going to write this, 5/10, remember going back to my place value chart, that means right on, I have 5/10 here, 5 in the tens place. So I am going to write that as 5/10. Okay, which is not equivalent. So one of these is not equivalent to 5/10. Okay, so let's see. Let's take a look at this letter B. Is 5/10 the same as 50 hundredths? And at first you might say, oh man, I don't know. But remember, we're just talking about an equivalent fraction. Are those equivalent? Well, let's just see. 10 times what is 100? Times 10. So if I multiply that denominator by 10 and I multiply that numerator by 10, hey, I get 50. So this one is okay. But I'm looking for the one that's not. So that can't be my answer. This can't be my answer because we already said that it's 5/10, right? So our question now is 5/10 equal to 1/2? Ooh. Well, just looking at this, if this is a pizza with 10 slices to make a whole, and this is, I have 5 of those slices, I think I'm in pretty good shape. That looks like 1/2. That looks like I have half of the slices. I can also double check it by dividing by 5. If I divide each one of these by 5, remember I got to do the same thing to both the denominator and the numerator. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. So that is it. This must be my answer. Okay, let's do number 8. Number 8 here. We'll switch across and take a look. We'll do this in red. Of the students in the 6th grade, 3/5 pack their lunch. What percent of these students pack their lunch? So here we go again. We're just changing 3/5 to a percent. Okay. Now you can actually go back and look. This is a great strategy because if we go back, we already had a fraction that dealt with fifths. So let's go back and find that. We found 1/5, I think, somewhere. I thought we did. Maybe we didn't here. 1/5, was that back? Maybe that was in a previous lesson. Okay. Oh, this was it. We had 1/5, but we didn't change it to a percent. Okay, that's all right. So one of the things I was going to point out is common fractions. So there are common fractions you can learn, like 1/4. We know 1/4 is equal to like a quarter, which is 25 cents, right? Which is 25%. Whoops. Well, 3/5. If you know 1/5, you can find 3/5. So I was just going to show you 1/5, okay? I could either take 1, and on your calculator, you could do 1 divided by 5. I think we did this already. Pretty sure. Oh, we did. We changed it to 2/10. That's right. So we did this already. So we know, whoops, got to write it kind of small. It doesn't want to write on that gray area. So 1 divided by 5 is 2/10. So 1/5 is 2/10. Okay, and remember 2/10, whoops, 2/10 is the same as what percent? Well, if we go to our place value chart, let's go over here, place value chart. If I put 2/10, I could put 2/10 is the same as 20 hundredths, which is 20%. So I'll do that over here. 2/10. This is what I just did. You know, when I added that 0, I basically said 2/10, and what I did was I said, oh well, that's the same. That's equivalent to. Notice I'm multiplying the denominator and the numerator by the same thing. 20 hundredths. Out of 1/100 is 20%. So I'm doing all this just to say that 1/5 is 20%. Okay, so that's one way to do this, is just to know that 1/5 is 20%. So if 1/5 equals 20%, what would 3/5 be? Well, 3/5 would be 20% is 1/5 plus 20% again would be 40. Whoops. Plus 20 more percent would be 60. So that's one way to do it. You can say it's worth 60%. The other way would be for you to say 3/5. Can I scale it up to 100? Sure. Times 20, right? 5 times 20 is 100. And 3 times 20. And I got 60. And that is also another way to do it. Okay, let's look at the next one there. And again, I know I'm going kind of fast, but you can stop and always go back. Okay, which fraction is in its simplest form is equivalent to 64%? Okay, so which one of these is equivalent to 64%? Well, let's take 64%. Several ways to do that. We could try to scale up to 64, but I think the best way to do that is, again, start with 64, and remember, we can always simplify over and over again. That strategy is so helpful. So this is a kind of a tricky one. We can divide by 2. You know, you want to think about 2, 4, 5. Think about these little simple ones here. So if we divide by 2, we can start with that. So that's by 2 by 2. That equals 32 over 50. And I'm going to make some more space down here. So let's think about that. 32 and 50. And if you can find, so here's where you want your greatest common factor, all that stuff about factors, because if you know 32, you know, oh, I could get 8 times 4 is 32. And then you could maybe think through here, well, 50, oh, no, I guess not. So let's come down here. We'll try that one more time. 32. Guess I was wrong. I thought maybe we could kind of find a quick way to do that, but I don't see it right off the bat here. So let's divide by 2. And that will give us 32 divided by 2 is 16, and 50 divided by 2 is 25. So that's going to be as far as we can go. Okay, we could keep trying, but you'll notice that's the answer we have over here. What's the strategy that helped? Simplify. And we didn't do anything fancy. We just divided by 2, and then we divided by 2 again. So I could have done divided by 4. I could have done that. All right, to start with, okay? All right, let's pop over to number 13 there. Pop over to 13. Which set has a fraction, decimal, and percent that are all equal? Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's a cool one. Let's look at the first one. I have 9/10, and then I have 9/100. So right away, forget that one. Those two don't match. 9/10 and 9/100, right? Remember, 9/10 on my place value chart is going to look like this. Let me pop that over there. Okay, get this out of the way. Sorry about that. Oh, erased it. That's okay. We're just going to see if it'll give it back to me there. I'll pause. 9/10 is going to be here. Okay? 9/100, like we saw with that other decimal, means 9 in the hundredths place. So that's why that cannot be equal. Okay? All right, let's go back. Here is 4/5, 8/10, and 80%. This is a little bit harder to see now. So what we're going to have to do is think about, well, 8/10, okay? And I think the easiest way to do 8/10 and 80%, let's see if those work, is let's put them on a place value chart, okay? So if I have 8/10, I can add a 0 here, and 8/10 is the same as 80/100 if I think about that. Remember, we did one just a second ago. So adding that 0 doesn't change anything. Now, if I had an 8 over here, if I had an 8 in the ones place and I said, well, I'm going to move it over and put 8 here, and if I put a 0 in front over here, well, that's different. That means that does affect it, because I'm saying now I'm moving that 8, instead of 8 ones, it's 8 tens. But here, I haven't really changed the value. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's still really 8. I have 8/10, 0 hundredths. But I can also think of it as 80/100. Here's the fraction part down here. 10 times what is 100? So times 10, and that proves it right there. Okay, so far so good. Now the other part of that was 4/5. Remember that? So now I have this 4/5. Well, again, remember we just did a problem where we found out that, let me come over and erase this. We just did a problem and we talked about 1/5 is the same as 20%. And you can just remember that fact. You'll see that a lot. You'll see 1/4 and 1/5 a lot. 1/5 or 1/4 we said was 25%. You have to just go back in the recording and see where we found it. So if 1/5 is 20%, what would 4/5 be? Well, we would have 20. There's 1, 2, 3, And I'll have to put the fourth one down here, 4. So we have 20, 40, 60, 80. So that does equal 80%. Because 1/5 equals 20%. So let's go back and take a look. And again, I know I'm going a little fast, but you can always come back and check it. So here, this one looks like it's good, so we don't even need to go any further. Now, 3/4 does equal 75%. Remember, I told you 1/4. That's going to come up a lot. What does that equal to in terms of percents? That's 1/4. Decimal 25, same as 25%. So 3 of those would be 25, 50, 75. So that part would be true, but that one wouldn't. So we already found ours, so I just thought I'd point that out to you. And again, here's that 1/5, which again, if you know that's equal to 20%, you got it. You got it nailed. All right, let's come over here. I want to show you how to reason about percent. If you can learn how to reason about these things, it's super helpful. So what percent is equal to 1/8? Well, if you think about this, well, first of all, you could take 1 and you could divide by 8 on your calculator. Or we could say we have $1 shared with 8 people. We're going to have to break this dollar into tenths. So now we have 10 dimes or 10 tenths here. So each person would get 1, and that'd be 8. And we could do this. And again, if you do it on a calculator, it's super fast, right? You can just press up a button. Let me erase this part here. 2 pretty cool ways to do this, okay? 8 goes into 20. That's 2 times. That is 16. And that's going to be 4. And I'm going to keep going. One more 0. 8 goes into 45 times. So what percent is equivalent to 0.125? Okay, well, remember, percent means out of 100. So basically what we're going to do with this, to convert a decimal to a percent, we are just going to multiply it. We're going to do 0.125 times 100. Remember to go from when we go to a decimal, we divide. Yeah, we're dividing by that 100 to get there. So this time we're going to multiply so that we have this out of 100. And if you multiply, that's just shifting on a place value chart. Okay. You may already know how to do it. We can come do it over here. 0.125. Just something that you have to keep in mind when you're changing from a decimal. And I did that with one of those other, the first video in one of the examples. But when you're changing from a decimal, 0.125 to a percent, we are going to multiply by 100. And that means this is shifting times 10 times 10 like this. It's going to do 2 decimal places. Times 10 makes it shift to that decimal spot. That place value, the hundreds to the tenths, and now the tenths to the ones. 2 decimal, 2 place values. What's our answer? 12.5%. So there it is, 12.5%. Now I want to show you something really cool about that, because if you know your fractions, you know that 1/4, how 1/4 and 1/8 are related. So I'm going to erase this and show you something really fast. It's kind of cool. Okay. So you might know, if you draw a picture of a pizza like this, separated into 4 parts, this is 1/4 right here. If I then cut this into, if I cut each slice in half, then I get, this one would be 1/8. In other words, you notice 1/8 is half of that big piece that was there, and that big piece that was there was 1/4. So 1/8 is half of 1/4. Well, 1/4, we talked about, I'll start over here. 1/4 is 25%. Ooh, and guess what happens if you take half of 25? Half of 25. You can do that on your own. Use a calculator. It's 12 5/10. So half of 25% is 12.5%. So there's just another way to do it, another cool way. So, it's really fun when you go back and forth between these numbers, and it's really fun when you start to memorize, oh, 1/4 is 25%, 1/5 is 20%. You can do some cool stuff with it, okay? And then you can look at, if you know 1/4, you also know 1/8. If you know 1/3, you can figure 1/6. So those are cool things. Okay, which is equivalent to 2. That's in the hundredths place. This is an easy one. So if we write this on our place value chart, it's in the hundredths place. That's 2/100ths. You just kind of say that decimal, 2/100ths. Well, 2/100ths, okay. So now let's come over here and see if we can figure that out. Well, looks like we got some fractions over here. We know it's not 20%. They're trying to trick us. It's 2%. But we can always... Here we go again. How many times have we used that strategy? Holy smokes. Let's divide. And looks like our only option is 2, right? Because we've got a 2 in that numerator. So that becomes 1. And 100 divided by 2, 50. Bing, bing. So 1/50th is 2%. All right, let's keep going here. Which fraction is equivalent to 3? And it's in the hundredths place. Now we have 3/100ths. Let's look over here. Oh, we got this one. Super easy, super easy. Look at that. There it is right there, 3/100ths. We don't even have to simplify. Okay? It's not 3/10. It's not 3/10 because this cannot be simplified. And it's not 1/3, okay? Because that would be a lot bigger than 3. If you only had 3 slices of a pizza that had 100 slices, you're not getting a lot. But if you have a pizza that's cut into 3 slices and you get one of them, that's a lot. And we're not even talking about that, boy. Okay, here we go. Dwayne made 23 out of 25 of his free throws. What percent of his free throws did he make? Ooh, got a ratio going. 23 out of 25. We can write that in fraction form. 23 out of 25. Okay? Now you want to change that to a percent? You can take your calculator and just divide. You can just, on a calculator, you can just say 23 divided by 25, okay? I'm not going to do that because that's going to be some long division. First, I'm going to see if I can do it the easy way. The easy way. Let's try the easy way. First, can we get this so that we have, percent means out of 100. Can we get this to where we have 100 on the bottom? That's what we're going to ask, okay? If we can do that, then we're home free, home free. Well, 25 times what equals 100? There you go, back to that 1/4, right? 1/4, that's a quarter. How many quarters in a dollar? 4. So a lot of this stuff you can just, use your common sense. You don't have to get too bundled up or too excited about it. Okay, I don't know what 23 times 4 is, so I'm just going to put it down here and we'll work it out. 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 times 2 is 8, 9. 92%. So if you think about it, if you get 23 out of 25, that's some awesome free throw shooting. I mean, you're only missing 2. So that makes sense that it's going to be like super high number, like 92 out of 100 or 92%. Okay? All right, let's come down here. The band Trying Times, the band, and the name of the band is Trying Times, has 2 members that are women and 3 that are men. So we already know where this is going. They're going to do some kind of a percent here. 2 and 3 are men. What decimal represents the fraction of band numbers that are women? So where's our women? Okay, we've got 2 are women. Now, usually on the bottom of your fraction, that's your whole. Well, what's the whole here? How many people altogether? 5. Guess what we got again? See that 5? We got 2/5. 2/5. Look, we already know 1/5 is equal to, we know, 20%. 20% is equal to 0.20. So 2/5 would be equal to, oops, I have to come down here. It won't write on that grade. 2/5 we know is going to be equal to 40%, which is equal to 0.40. So we're looking for 0.40. Can't be this one. Can't be that one. Can't be that one. And then you say, well, wait a minute. Decimal 4, is that the same as 4/10, the same as 40 hundredths? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is, okay? Because we talked about that on our place value chart. We can go back and take a look here. Here, let me pause. Okay, here is 40 hundredths. That's just a 40, and here is 4/10. Look at the value. This literally means, okay, let me circle. This first one literally means I have 4/10 and 0 hundredths. And guess what? The second one also means I have 4/10 and 0 hundredths. So you might say, well, why do you add this 0 there? Well, sometimes the 0 just helps us to understand, or like, and when we do a percent, really, it helps us to write it as a percent. But if I can put a 0 here, and I can very convincingly say from this place value that 40 hundredths is the same as 4/10. Okay, I can also take 40 hundredths and I can divide each one by 10, right? We can simplify. There's that big idea again, works for everything, or lots of things. 40 divided by 10 is 4, and 100 divided by 10 is 10. So I can prove it this way also. Okay? All right, let's go back. What percent is equivalent to the decimal 0.781? All right, so here's what we're doing. When we go from a decimal to a percent, we just take the decimal, we multiply the decimal by 100. Okay? And the reason we're doing that is because percent means out of 100. So that means we've got it, we're going to put it over, it means something out of 100. Okay? So we're going to just multiply it by 100. So let's just put it on a place value chart and shift it. Easiest way to do it, 0.781. So let's, whoops. Oh. Okay, well here you go. I've got this written on a place value chart. So we're going to do decimal 781, or 781 thousandths times 100. Okay? And we're going to do that because that's what we do with a decimal, because it means out of 100. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you're just moving the decimal 1, 2 points. And you can think of it that way, but I want you to understand that you're really not moving the decimal, you're shifting the digits. If I multiply this times 100, I shift it not only to here, but over to the next one. That's 2 shifts over, because times 10 goes to the next greatest place value. Times 10, again, next greatest place value. Same thing with this one. Oh! Sorry, something weird happened. Oh, come on, there we go. Okay, so I have 78, and of course my decimal goes here, and again, just like down here, 78.1, or 78 1/10%. So this is 78 1/10%, okay? A door is let's look at the next one, we're almost done. The door is 1.4 meters high. What mixed number in simplest form is equivalent to 1 4/10? All right, well, a mixed number means they want us to put this into a fraction form. That's all. Don't let that scare you. So 1, let's just say it, 1 4/10. So just by saying it out loud, we're like, oh, okay, 1 4/10. But they also said it's supposed to be in simplest form. No problem. We'll just divide. We'll divide by 2, and we'll get 1, and 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 1 2/5 is the same as, that's equivalent to 1 4/10. Okay? That's equivalent. All right, I think that's going to do it. Yeah, that's going to do it. You hung in there. Good job. Remember, you can watch a little bit of this, or as much or as little as you want, but now you've got that. You can always go back if you're like, oh, how do I change decimals and fractions? You can watch any part of this and just get a quick refresher, okay? You're doing a great job. Hang in there. Bye-bye.